The scarcity of foreign exchange has given rise to heavy reliance on the parallel market, resulting in a depreciation of the naira. This in turn has caused a surge in the cost of goods and services, compounding the challenges faced by consumers and further diminishing our purchasing power. Experts argue that government must continue to address supply chain disruptions, energy price fluctuations, and fiscal deficits to tame the surge in inflation, which have impacted the cost of living and reducing purchasing power of average Nigerians. Mr. Gabriel Idahosa is the Deputy President of the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. He joins me via Zoom, live from Ikeja here in Lagos. Thank you so much. It's good to have you on the program, Mr. Idahosa.
Thank you.
Well, it's been a while, and I know that a lot has happened and a lot of press releases, of course, and comments from the Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry. But let me ask you, at the moment, FX seems to be the big elephant in the cupboard. Dollar exchanges for above 1,000 naira. A little bit of respite yesterday. We saw a decrease in that disparity. But tell me how this has been impacting the market. What are you hearing? What do we need to know at this time?
Well, the market is not, there's no section of the market that is immune to the foreign currency situation. You either directly imported, for example, our members who are manufacturers and import raw materials, or who import finished goods. So clearly there is no business person that has sufficient foreign currency to do whatever they are doing. So the general experience is that even if you are officially allowed access into the market, you can apply for foreign currency, you get maybe 10% or 20% of what you need from the official market, and then you find a way to get the rest of it from the parallel market. And that has not changed at all in what has happened in the last 4 or 5 months. It is just the aggravation of the situation that is now reflecting in the increasing exchange rates. The fact that the amount of foreign currency available continues to shrink, and the demand that cannot be postponed, demand that is critical to either personal existence or corporate existence, is either stable or just slightly reducing, not reducing as fast as the supply. And that is why we have this situation. Along with that, of course, is aggressive speculation by sections of operators in the economy who, for some reason, believe that the scarcity of foreign currency will extend for much longer than we have. So if you take out the fact of that aggressive speculation and hoarding, quote unquote, of dollars, you probably will still have the level of scarcity they have now, but the price may not be as high as what you have now. If we did not have certainly a certain level of very aggressive speculative hoarding of the dollar. But every operator is definitely impacted. You are finding capacity production for manufacturers coming down, the debts settlement for foreign obligations are piling up, and a lot of businesses running into penalties for non-settlement of foreign debts. And it continues to aggravate. But the signs that we have almost reached the resistance point are beginning to show. There's only so much you can continue to increase the price of the dollar to a point where at corporate and individual levels, people say, well, we can't afford it anymore. Whatever will happen, we are no longer going to do those things that will make us have to spend dollars. So we seem to be around that corner now where there will probably be a pushback. Those who are at the edge of the economy, who are engaging in aggressive speculation, will probably be forced to release some of the dollars they are holding to avoid losses that might result by a sudden turn in the market.
And recently, the CBN stepped up, says 43 items that before now were restricted, they can now access FX at the window of the Apex Bank. Some say this clearly means that those queues we used to have will get longer because they won't have to go to the other market. They have to come into the CBN's official window to access FX. What does that mean to the entire business environment?
Not much. Not much. It is just a perception that those 43 items will increase the pressure on central bank. To the extent that they will want to have access, they will apply. But in terms of what they actually get, it will not be very far from what is happening now. All the other sectors of the economy that had access will all had to continue to apply, and they rarely get up to 20% of whatever they apply for. Sometimes they get 10% of what they apply for. That is why you have, for example, all the airlines had their ticket sales piling up, because each time they apply, they get a very small amount of what they apply for. So it's just that the queue will get a bit longer in the sense that the 43 entities, sectors will join the queue. But in terms of overall impact on the market, we must remember that these 43 sectors have been operating for the past 6 or 7 years, where they were excluded from the CPN. They didn't leave the country. They didn't hold their businesses and leave the country. They have been operating regularly like everyone else, and getting their currency from the private market, and they will continue to do so. Almost 90% of what they need will still come from the private market. They probably get about 10 to 15% from the CBN now that they are joining the queue. So you will not see a significant impact from that fact of being removed. The CBN is just accepting the reality that it was a policy that was unnecessary in the first place. Because when you allow 43 sectors in the economy, operators in the economy, to remain operating in the economy, and you just say, well, you can't come to the CBN, they are not going to disappear from the Nigerian economy. They did not disappear. They were here, and they were as active as ever. So I think the fact that the CBN has taken that back means that that matter has been settled. The way the petroleum subsidy and the conversion, the convergence of foreign currencies have been settled. Once we remove all these disruptions in the economic landscape, and we have a clear field to implement policy, it's easier for policy formulation and implementation, rather than having exceptions and rules and waivers for some people in the sector, and then you cannot have a coherent policy approach to dealing with issues like foreign currency. Now there are no constraints. Whatever foreign currency strategy that the central bank is going to design and implement, now we apply to the entire economy. It will not have to have a side policy for some people who are in 43, another side policy for some people who are entitled to a special exchange rate, and all manner of exceptions. If you take the global, complete helicopter view of the economy and decide those policies that work or that can work, and react to the response to those policies and adjust them accordingly without worrying about those people who are given special privileges or denied access into the market.
Now, many have commended the Taiwo Oyedele-led presidential committee, of course, on tax and fiscal policy reforms. And there was a quick win report submitted to the president sometime last week. I don't know if you've seen that document, but I'm sure you've heard some things about the content of that document. But for me, what do you think stands out in all of these policy recommendations? Tax breaks for private sector, looking at a way to use technology for taxation or for tax collection, making it more seamless than it is. What do you make of some of these recommendations, and how impactful would they be on the entire business community?
Well, the essential thrust of the committee work is to simplify tax collection. When you have about 50 or 80 different types of taxes or more, depending on what you count as tax or what you don't count as tax, all kinds of levies that are actually taxes. And you now try to run a fiscal regime where you are pursuing 50 or 60 or 70 different types of taxes. You certainly cannot make a good job of it. And as the committee pointed out, the countries we try to benchmark against, like South Africa, they have only 10 taxes, 10 items of taxes, and they are collecting several multiples of what we are collecting. And we are, rather than reducing, we have been multiplying the number of taxes we have. Almost every new legislation by the government introduces a special levy for this industry, for that industry, that industry. So the inland revenue is just running around trying to even cope with the number of taxes to collect. So what this committee is essentially saying is, let's reduce the number of taxes. What's important is total tax you collect, not the number of taxes you have in your system. And let's also ensure that a lot of these taxes that remain can be easily automated. And so it's easier using technology to pay those taxes. It's easier to track. And then government can focus on the efficiency of the tax system rather than trying to struggle to remember how many taxes government is pursuing and how to collect them and how many agencies are dealing with taxes. So once a few agencies are mandated to do tax collection, other regulatory agencies should just face regulation. We shouldn't turn almost every regulatory agency in Nigeria into another tax collecting agency. That's another thrust of the reforms that the committee is trying to address. That regulatory agencies should face the job of regulation. But revenue collection for the country should be streamlined into a small number of organizations that face the revenue collection and make them more efficient, give them the power to do it, and build the technology that enables everyone to be captured. So long as you live in this country, for example, and you have your NIN, your national identity number, it should be easy for you to come into the tax net. You don't really need too many ways of finding taxpayers. Just one identity is enough, and once you are in the tax net, it's up to the government to implement efficient collection of a small number of taxes and distribute that income to everybody else. So you don't need to have one tax for insurance companies, one tax for textile companies, one tax for technology companies, one tax for, education. So many taxes that we have in our system that, one tax for police, one tax for something else. That all this multiplicity of taxes and levies does not mean we actually collect more tax. It does that we overburden the tax collection system with too many taxes.
Too many of them. But one way or the other, many will say they don't want to increase the number of maybe payers. All they're trying to do is to sync the formal and informal sectors together so that we can get more funding, of course, for government. But let me ask you another question, which is a lot is being done, of course, on the fiscal side and maybe on a little too from the monetary side. But what are you thinking about that handshake that we'd always expect between both parties? I'm talking about the fiscal and the monetary side, because they must complement each other for us to be able to achieve inclusive growth, which remains important at this time. Are you seeing us moving towards that point where things will sync and there'll be that synergy expected from both sides? They won't be speaking from different sides of the mouth.
No, I think that's part of what the government is trying to achieve now. This committee, unlike most government committees, is given a fairly strong and long mandate. They are given 1 year to do a lot of work and see through the implementation. That enables them to work with all other government agencies, including the central bank, who controls monetary policy, and ensure that any inconsistencies or contradictions between the fiscal policies that are emerging from the work of the committee are harmonized with all other agencies. So at the end of the day, you will not have what you have described as monetary policy going in one direction and fiscal policy going another direction. And one example of that now is the fact that central bank is moving out of any form of intervention lending. They are moving out of this categorization of operators into those specific businesses, because that is a matter of fiscal policy. If you want to control people who produce rice or who produce tomato plants in Nigeria, you want to encourage them. You don't need the CBN to say they should not have access to foreign currency. It should be a matter for fiscal policy to encourage them. So gradually, this government is beginning to understand that the central bank should focus on monetary policy related matters. The fiscal policy institutions like the Ministry of Finance, the Federal Revenue Service, and all the Budget Office, all those agencies should harmonize their activities. And then as a whole, as a fiscal part of government, interface with the central bank at one point. So you don't have the central bank dealing with Ministry of Agriculture to intervene in some activities, dealing with Ministry of Industry to intervene in manufacturing, dealing with Ministry of Culture to intervene in culture, as we try to do up to the end of the previous administration. So it's likely that that handshake will be easier to do once you have one agency looking after the monetary policy, the central bank, and the entire fiscal policy related agencies harmonize the position and then have just one simple interface with the central bank and not several fiscal policy agencies interfacing with the central bank. We are likely to have that handshake if this government continues on this path that it has started.
Interesting. I'm now thinking how businesses have to reproject at this time. Many had projections before now, price of diesel, price of PMS, before we had all of these hikes. Even aviation, price for airfare now, we hear the airline operators saying, as we move towards the end of the year, we're going to get almost double of that. So what do you think would happen to businesses that had made projections before now? And looking at all of this that has affected those projections, what will be the outlook?
Well, when you come out of an election, most businesses have the experience now that when you come out of an election, whatever projections you have before the election are essentially due for revision. So most businesses are going through that now. They are watching new policies and looking at how they will revise their projections, definitely for next year. For the last quarter of this year, everybody is working by the day. You cannot really project anything for November or December. Rather, you accept what you see. But as we progress to the end of December and the budget being considered by the National Assembly becomes public knowledge, it will be possible to begin to do some projections.
It's a good way to live it. I must thank you so much, Deputy President, Lagos Chamber of Commerce and Industry, for your time. As usual, despite your tight schedule, Mr. Gabriel Idahosa, we appreciate this. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you.